Hello and welcome to Business Today. I am Siddharth Zarabi and with me a very special guest at Davos here at the World Economic Forum, Ronnie Screwvala, who is known as an entrepreneur in the media space and now the co-founder of upGrad. Thank you very much and welcome to Business Today.
Lovely environment here without the snow, but good fun.
Thank you. And the clouds and the rain hopefully will be fine with this conversation. Ronnie, I'm going to start about the broader context before we come to Davos. And this is the space that you are in, the EdTech space. The promise is immense. And I think the entire EdTech sector has shown promise. But there are also some concerns. For those who don't understand the specifics, how would you describe India and the EdTech sector? Is this a Wild West play or are we now maturing?
We're not maturing, I think, from a perspective of the companies and the breadth in the space is still fragmented. But I think it is an incredible space because of the simple reason. If you look at Davos on day one, almost every conversation, whether it was based on oil or petroleum prices, finally came down to the reskilling revolution that the world is going through and has to go through. Every point. I was in another session where I was just listening in on global supply chain. And finally they said, but the roots will come with countries and populations where reskilling will happen. And that's where factories will be built and whatever else. So if you look at this sector, it is the most opportune time, even though the world is going through its own trials and tribulations. But I think real leadership is not about worrying what the problems are, but seeking opportunities from them.
Ronnie, is it that you're telling us that while companies had to undergo so much transformation in the last 2-3 years, the employees, the people, they're also having to transform themselves, and that's the reskilling, upskilling challenge that individuals face?
Yeah, I would say taking the COVID impact out, because that kind of almost confuses the issue because everyone thinks now there's an entire work element of work from home. And I think we need to keep the two of reskilling quite separate from the new culture of whether some people will work from home or the hybrid. So yes, I think the urgency has come about in the last 2-3 years much more that people have to go with the, into inverted commas, lifelong learning mantra. So two parts to that really. I mean, nobody in their right mind today thinks that just with my college degree or post-graduation degree, I'm going to go through the next 40 years of my career with that knowledge.
Okay.
It's a given. The question is, what is the urgency of that? What is the timing of that? And how desperate do I want to do it?
Are certificates the answer?
I think knowledge, soft skills, and lifelong learning is the answer.
Define. So, sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Yeah.
Define lifelong knowledge for someone who is in a 8 to 10 job really, and what does that mean? Because if you talk to them, they'll say, well, I know so much about my work. What do you want me to do more?
They have to upskill and be relevant in today's context. Because I think today, if you're a marketer, but if you don't understand digital marketing, and there is a specialization. There is no such scene. Generalist and specialist combination is really where the future is heading. You can't only be a generalist, but you can't only be a specialist. And I know that the tech industry, for example, thinks that if you're a specialist. So I think that combination. The second is, you're not going to be in the same job for more than 3, 4, 5 years. It'll be silly if you're in one job only for 1 year and 2 years. But I think the life cycle of when our parents or when we were there, who would do 20 years in a job, has gone to a good average constructive 4 to 5 years on an average. And then you settle down in the tail end of yours, which means domain knowledge, expertise has to move to the next level.
The next logical follow-up would be that instead of 60 as the retirement age, should people also be prepared for exiting from the workforce at perhaps 50, 55? Is that also
agenda is to work till 85, so I don't know about the 55 part. And I don't know whether 65 is the new 55 or 55 is the new 65. So you can argue whichever way you want to do that. I think it's each one's personal goal, right? It's each one's personal goal. I think today the kind of opportunities, the kind of level of entrepreneurship in a country like India that is so robust that I think people are restless. I don't think people are thinking of retirement. And I think if we look at that, there's retirement is a state of approach where you feel I want to pace what I want to do, or I want to be very focused. So there are people who feel I want to do only one thing and I want to do it brilliantly and I want to do it at my own pace. Now, most people, I think that's retirement because otherwise you need to be in a frenzy of a 14-hour day. So I think that optionality of being able to pursue a lot more you want to be doing. And last, but definitely not the least, is you need to be a lot more rounded. You can't have specific knowledge and be just head down on that knowledge. even as a salesperson, you need to understand data, you need to understand analytics, you need to understand digital marketing. There is a 360-degree approach today, and therefore the knowledge that you had in the past cannot see you through life. That's why, so that's one part. And I think the word skilling today in India normally means you want to be a plumber, you want to be a carpenter, and whatever else. And I think that has to go because it's wordiology, it's vocabulary. But I think what you mean is whether you want to say re-upgrading yourself or re-skilling yourself, the main part is a new dimension of specialization. And I think that's why even the Indian government now has absolutely accepted the fact that without online and without digital, we can't do that. Because our infrastructure, our phenomenal faculty, but in limited numbers, is not going to be able to change things around.
What's upGrad doing in this space? Since you very well described the challenge, what is your company doing that? Explain that to the lay viewer.
Well, I would say, we're in the higher education space, right? I think we're an integrated play where anyone after K-12 who wants to come into the workforce, all the way up to 55, 60, and being a lifelong learner, we're going to hold their hand. So from undergrad degrees to post-graduation degrees with our partners and universities to everything else we do from short courses. Today, when you go to college, you don't get multiple choices. You either have to decide whether you want to be a BCom or a BA.
And you can't even combine, at least in the...
But therefore, augmented learning in universities is happening today, where campus learning with optionality, but I can take a short course of 3 months on data science or data analytics and understand what that means and whether I want to pursue that as a career. To the short courses, not every time you want to be only an MBA. But today, 90% of the people are in the workforce for socioeconomic reasons at a very early age and are now realizing the need to upgrade, cannot take their time off. And actually, we have to build credibility for online because most people think that's flippant. But for example, we have 85% completion records, right? Which means the experience that you create is as good as going to a university. With all due respect, that universities have done a phenomenal job. But peer-to-peer learning is here to stay. And I think people are not realizing that. And that just expands the faculty. So if you have incredible faculty, 70% of the people who take our courses today are industry professionals along with great faculty.
Okay.
So I can ask you, and you would be a great person to talk about either journalism, communication skills, soft skills, so many aspects. And you'd be happy to give 3 hours, not like 3 hours every Saturday, but once. So you suddenly expanded the base of people. And second, the best learning today that people are learning is from peers. As much as you don't believe in marketing, you believe in social media to figure out a reference to an airline ticket or a hotel. So that's where the world has moved. And that's the beauty of online.
Okay. There's been a term that's used for the insurance sector a lot, misselling. Would I be fair in asking whether there's been misselling in the EdTech space? Without taking names, you get to read some amount of chatter about, promises beyond the possible. Is that also true?
So I think misselling would mean misrepresentation and should not be mixed up with aggressive selling or overselling, bordering on an overcommitment. Now, it is true, like as a parent, I can't guarantee that tell my daughter, I'm guarantee you marry this person, you're gonna have happiness for the rest of your life. That way, if I oversell and say, if you do this and you do this in algebra, you do this in trigonometry, your son or your daughter is going to be first
take this course and he'll be the next Bill Gates.
I think there could be a sense. I'm not in the K-12 sector, and I think that's where the real aggressive selling or slightly bit of an overcommitment could be taking place. And I think parents are at that stage where they are fragile, and I think there is always that FOMO and there's always that guilt complex, and COVID only accentuated that. So what you saw in these last 2 years is everyone homebound, 24/7 with your kids, guilty about what will happen to them. They're not having social impact. Whatever I can do to augment their learning, let me give it to them and let me not feel. It's 2 things in your life you really want to not regret: spending time with your parents and giving everything for your kids. And I think if you take those 2 strongest emotions in life that most people...
So to those parents, what would you tell them?
No, I think it's a rational decision that you need to do. Don't get driven with the FOMO. I don't think you should come down in the elevator and if your neighbor says, "Arey, you're not doing this course, my son is doing this course," you feel,
dekho. Okay, a dozen and more, and perhaps many more EdTech companies being minted even as we speak by smart
Minted may not be the most appropriate word, but I know you tried to punch that in, so I just want to hold on to that.
How are valuations looking like? We've seen some amount of pain also, and the natural growing up process, teenage years for startups, layoffs, and everything else.
I think valuation is beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and valuation is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
So if you've got somebody who buys into your story and wants to overinvest or invest at a value that they think is fair, who else is there? It's an interstate relationship between two people. That's the beauty about the private equity space versus the listed equity space. And I think the big challenge today in India is twofold. One, I think there's just too much focus with founders to have a chest thumping event where almost every
grab the headlines.
Well, but with all due respect, media contributes their little salt, pepper, tomato sauce, and everything else with it. But notwithstanding that, I think that is really where that obsession has to go away. And if you see the real people, today it's no longer good enough to just raise funding. That's the bottom of the heap. In fact, that should be the least chest thumping. Then are people building a real business? Then are they building a business to last? And I think if I survived in media for the time I did, it was because of my laser sharp focus that I wanted to build a company that would outlast. And I think in my 15 years in media, lots of people told me, oh, XY is doing this, why aren't you doing that? We had tugs and pulls at valuation levels, at activity levels, at diversity levels. Why am I not in news? Why am I not in this? Why am I not in movies? You just have to go about thinking, let's talk after 5 years. And I think with most nascent industries, the men and the boys will get separated, or the women and the girls, because I think there's enough of them there, and I don't want to sound at all, will get separated as it goes. So I think the big thing I worry about today is this intoxication of valuations. And the other big thing I worry about is when you've had 5 years of private equity and you're bored of private equity, and then when you want to be a listed company, it's a problem. And anyone I talk to as fellow entrepreneurs, the first thing I say is if you want to be a listed entity in 1 year, at least 50% of your board make them independent directors. Otherwise, what you're hearing here as a rhetoric is going to change so drastically that you'll feel lost.
On a broader context, when we talk about valuations, we've seen, Ronnie, that money has come in droves, and now because of what is happening globally, there are question marks on whether so much private equity capital will continue to flow. Do you see that happening? Will that have an impact on the broader startup space in India, not just EdTech?
I do see that capital flow happening because, let's face it, the India story is fantastic. We are growing and we'll be the fastest growing economy in the world this year. But I think we'll be the fastest growing economy for a continued period of time if you look at what's happening around the world. Two, we're a very large demographic market. And yes, people may come from the outside and say, tough market. Yes. But we're not asking you. You're backing an entrepreneur here who's running a tough business and they've understood what a tough market it is. If you want to come in here and helicopter land yourself, that's different. So I would say money is going to come in on an ongoing basis. I mean, this year, I think we raised about 80 to 90 billion. Vietnam has raised 100 billion in the same time in FDI.
Wow. Take note of that.
Okay. And that's something that I learned here at Davos. But my immediate reaction was, it's fantastic, especially for a country like Vietnam. But if you look at it, they will go through a phase of 2, 3, 4 years. Who in the world can continue to put money into India 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line? Because you need a very good and very strong homegrown market. And the only other real one was China, which is a lot more insulated for multiple reasons of their own choice. Therefore, we are not just the last bastion, but today we're the first bastion and the last bastion as far as India is concerned as a destination.
Since you mentioned China, a quick comment, if you may, on the Chinese story, especially around some of their biggest startups. And we see some amount of drastic change, and news flow is restricted, so one doesn't really know the full details. But would it be correct to say that there's a big shakeout happening in the Chinese startup space, tech space, and India has an opportunity there?
I don't think there's a connection. I think that what has happened today is it's not a regulatory shakeout. It's much more a political shakeout. I think the culture in the Chinese way and their government and their style is something where they do believe in that sense of high equality, where the high profileness is not necessary. So I think they've had their challenges with a few high profile entrepreneurs there, and they just wanted to build them and put them into their own. But I think the way they've built it, with the systematic way in which China has built their economy, we have to give them their due respect in every sense of the word. They know exactly what they're doing. They spend a lot on research and development. They do think long term. They have been able to build internal solutions for technology and everything else so that they're less dependent on the West, who they do not trust. And that's their agenda. India, very different country, different agenda, different priorities.
We've talked about so much, but as I let you go, I'm going to ask you about your other passion and not upGrad. And this is movies and entertainment. What are you working on now?
So I think, I fooled myself in 2012 when I exited media and divested to Disney, thinking that...
Why did you say fooled yourself?
Well, I'm completing the sentence. I've not fooled myself on the business decision. Fooled myself that actually the passion of storytelling will go away from me. And for 5 years, that didn't bother me. But I think today I'm doing it much more as a passion. My first and only focus is to make the impact in education that I do want to make outside of our not-for-profit, the Swadesh Foundation. So I think it's a great, it's called RSVP. We make it selectively, and I've learned the power of passion. The difference between running a passion and running a business is if you can say no 99 times. When you're running a business, 50% of the time you do things that you want to do, 50% what you have to do. But in a passion project, 100% of the time, you should do only what you want to do.
Great advice as always, Ronnie Screwvala. That was
Thank you.
A great pleasure talking to you. One of India's best entrepreneurs from Davos with us, giving you notes that you should always keep in your pocketbook. Thanks very much once again. With that, it's a wrap on this conversation. If you have, thank you very much for watching.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.